Welcome. So I'm losing my voice a little bit, so if I transition to Mickey Mouse halfway through the presentation, just keep going. Mickey Mouse will come talk about onion soup. So, how's everyone enjoying BlinkOn? We're like mostly through? Great. I see lots of thumbs up. See some people that look like they want lunch. All right. This is so fancy, by the way. I'm not used to this. I feel like I'm giving an I/O presentation. So I'm going to talk about Blink Onion Soup today. Or in Germany, I'm going to butcher the German. It's Blink Zwiebelsuppe, which would also be onion soup. Zwiebel? I hear two different pronunciations up here. One of them is probably right. All right. So it's been 6 months since I did my previous presentation about this. I presented this crazy plan. I was like, look, we're going to do this onion soup thing. And everyone was like, are you really going to do it? And I was like, yes, we're totally going to do it. And people were like, I'm very skeptical, like Pavel, who's sitting right there. And I was like, no, we're really totally going to do it. So I'm going to start by talking about all the huge progress that we made. So we simplified a lot of abstractions. We removed a lot of layers. We deleted a lot of code. I don't have exact numbers, but it's somewhere between 1,000 lines and 50,000 lines. Either way, it's amazing. And it's been really great. There's been this huge positive energy around it. We've had a lot of momentum. We've also reduced a lot of duplication. There was a lot of duplication in content. There was a lot of duplication in Blink. We've removed all kinds of plumbing and type conversions, just assorted code that's just been littered everywhere for years. And we've really brought a lot of ownership to big parts of the code base. We've also improved happiness. There used to be just an angst at the boundary. You'd start building your feature either outside of Blink or inside of Blink, and then you'd hit this boundary in the middle, and your day was just ruined. You were like, oh my god, my 5-line patch just turned into like 500 lines of plumbing, and I'm not even sure why all these classes are here, and none of the names make any sense anymore. And I routinely saw that. Someone would post a patch, and then they'd be like, oh, let me do the plumbing, and the patch would go from tiny little patch to enormous patch, and it was just incredible boilerplate, and nobody was happy about it. And all of that is gone now. We've had huge success. So here is what Blink looked like in November. It was all cut up by black lines, which was sort of unfortunate. So there's this web layer at the top, and there's core and modules and so on, and then there's this platform implementation that's way out in content. And then not even depicted here, there was just crazy plumbing everywhere. Didn't make any sense. Frequently, you'd ask someone where something was, and no one really knew. So today, it looks a lot more like this. We took content, and we chopped a huge slice of it off. See the box? Got smaller. And modules over here got bigger. And we moved all kinds of code into Blink. We also added a dependency on base, and we deleted thousands of lines. We added a dependency on mojo, and we deleted even more. And so it's been hugely successful as we've grown Blink and shrunk content and really just brought the whole Chromium project closer together. So here you see content to modules. And almost every day, I see another patch that moves a big feature. And so I'm going to go through a couple of those, talk about the big success we had, and then talk about what's next. So let's start with Blink and Mojo. But previously, to do IPC, there was this old IPC system. Either good or bad, I didn't see it very much, because it was all out in content. It was a little crazy. You did these really big if statements of like all the IPCs, because the system apparently didn't really know what the IPC was, so it just told everybody. And it was quite painful to use. And then we had a lot of boilerplate to switch between the types out in content and the types in Blink, and to just plumb things out there. And instead, we now have mojo bindings for WTF. And this was a huge improvement. In fact, you can do IPC from anywhere in Blink now. Just like an IDL file gets you a JavaScript API, you put a mojom file, it's .mojom, somewhere in Blink. You get a review from D. Chang or someone, who maybe is in the audience, over there somewhere. And then now you have a new IPC. And all the code is auto-generated for you. In fact, the amazingness is that when it's used in the browser process, it uses their data types. And when it's used in the render process, it uses our data types. And you don't even have to think about it. It just magically works. This deleted just incredible amounts of code everywhere. And we also just removed a lot of plumbing. And this has allowed us to move all kinds of stuff out of content and into Blink. And this was done by YZ Shen, who's on the Mojo team. I don't think he's here at BlinkOn, but he did really incredible work to build a Mojo compiler for WTF for us. So here's an example of what IPC looks like now. It's actually kind of beautiful. You declare your service, and then you connect to it, and then you call your method, and you pass it the callback for when you get your answer. If you squint a little bit, it even looks slightly like JavaScript. So we have two service registries in Blink as well. There's one for frame, and then there's one for platform. Platform is per process. That's like global. I'm hoping we can get away from that. I see some stuff that hangs out down there. But then we also have this one on frames, which is really awesome, because that's also your IPC channel is tied to your security context. So anyone who worked out in the content layer, there's these things called routing IDs and frame IDs, and you like pass them all around and like hope everything works. But that's all managed by Mojo now. There's a separate set of services per frame. And then the callbacks, this is really nice. You just bind. Now, you'll notice some funkiness in the example here. Right over there, you'll see this weird create base callback thing. That's actually because base callback and WTF callback are slightly different, which is unfortunate. And there's someone working on fixing that right now. In fact, there was a lightning talk yesterday about merging all of this together and having one set of unified callback infrastructure. And at that point, this will just become bind. And then you don't even have to squint very hard, and it looks like JavaScript. These are the things that we've moved. The list is enormous. All of this code used to be in content. Now almost all of it is in Blink. There's a couple features that haven't completely moved. I think notifications is USB might be about halfway. But for the most part, it's all moved. And this was like tens of thousands of lines. I started counting patches, and I like gave up. And it's amazing, actually, because the code gets way simpler. And it also, a lot of bugs got fixed by this, because now you can use OilPan to manage the lifetime of your objects. And this was actually not possible when you were in content, which made some things very difficult. Because JavaScript awesomely has garbage collector. Content did not. And so frequently, there was very confusing lifetime management out there, particularly around the media stock and some of the other features, trying to get them to work. Now I want to talk about performance.now. Performance.now needed an intervention. Someone said that it was too slow. And I said, that's interesting. Why is it too slow? Now, we didn't make it the fastest thing in the world. But what I did learn is that it had way too many layers. This is what a call stack to performance.now looked like back in November. You started somewhere in some JavaScript. And through many, many layers of indirection, you eventually hit a function, a static function in base that returned the current time. I said, well, that seems crazy. So I looked at the Firefox code, and it didn't look anything like this. And I was like, wow, what happened here? And this was the legacy of having Blink platform and having this huge level of abstractions around really simple things. So this is fixed. UDK fixed this. Now you can see the call stack makes sense. And it removed 2 layers, tons of plumbing across the entire code base, and it made performance.now 5% faster, which is the kind of patches I like. When you post a patch and you say, all I did is delete code and it's faster, that's amazing. You will I will send you things. We even have a tiny little yak in San Francisco that's like shaving. It's got like a can of shaving cream and a little razor. We will, if you're not in the San Francisco office, we will mail it to you. You too can be the keeper of the yak shave. Next, I want to talk about histograms. We improved histograms greatly. Actually, Dave Tapasuka did. I don't know if he's here, but it was really awesome. He added a histogram to hit testing, and it caused big regression in some SVG test. It didn't make any sense. How possibly did the histogram cause a big regression in SVG? And so then he traced it all the way through those incredible number of layers we saw with performance.now, all the way out into the way we were using histograms in content. And it turned out we were using them wrong. And we'd always been using them wrong, since forever. And so he deleted those layers. Now, his patch says he made the benchmark 10% faster. So that's why I'm not quoting numbers. I suspect he actually made histograms in Blink something like 80% faster. Because previously, a histogram was full of atomic locks and branches and map lookups. And now it's a pointer access. And that's what it should have been for years, except we had so many layers that nobody noticed. And so this is a huge improvement. In fact, the way that use counter works is by poking a histogram about 1,000 times on page unload. And he made that like 80% faster, just by removing layers, which is just incredible. Canuco deleted WebUnitTest support. This is also really nice. Writing unit tests is even easier than it was before. There used to be all this weird plumbing to like get out into the unit testing infrastructure, and now that's gone. It was actually really amazing to see this patch. Kanuko moved all the different plumbing for loading URLs out of WebUnitTest Support. And then, pardon me. All right. And then actually merged the unit testing code back into Blink. And the tests make a lot more sense now. Because now when you want to mock something, instead of running this weird plumbing stack all the way out into the universe, you just say, I want to mock a URL, or I want to use this gtest feature. It was a very large improvement, particularly in the post-fork world, where we love unit tests. In fact, if you post a patch and it has no tests, and it has no unit test coverage, that's sort of sad. So you should probably get on writing some unit tests, because they're really easy now. Next, I want to talk about Alexei. That's Loizo. He had this project called Heaviside that he was going to do, where he was going to unify the animation engine. And there's one in CC, there's one in Blink. There's a lot of duplication, a lot of crazy. I'm probably not doing his project justice. He has a really nice design doc that describes it. But he went above and beyond in this onion soup thing. His project was actually incredible. He deleted over 8,500 lines of code. He removed 18 abstraction classes, 200 virtuals, and simplified the code base down incredibly. In fact, when you look at the animation engine running now, it makes sense. And it didn't used to make any sense at all. In fact, there was just like stuff everywhere. And his patches were like really amazing. It was like, move this thing here, delete all the layers. And it was just one after the other for like several quarters. I need to get like a little onion soup trophy or something that I can send him, because this, like, if we can do this just a couple more times, it would be really amazing. So there's also more success, actually. We deleted several thousand lines of WTF. We simplified a substantial portion of the web layer. And we're also sharing a lot of code with components now. We share URL parsing. We share link parsing. There's a couple other things that we're sharing now, too. And as more time passes, we're sharing more and more code, HTTP header parsing, I think. And so that's actually been really awesome to see this happen, because previously what would happen is a Blink engineer would fix a bug, and it would be broken in the browser process. Or the browser process would fix a bug and be broken in Blink. And now we're much better about it. We have unit test coverage on both sides, and we're sharing the code, which means we ship a much better product to our users. So here's a list of people who have helped. It's enormous. In just 6 months, all of these people from across the whole organization came and joined the onion soup effort to delete code, to remove layers, to simplify the code base, and to improve developer happiness, which has just been really heartwarming, because when someone comes in, and a lot of these people weren't even working in the part of the code base that was related to them. They just came in and they said, this code doesn't make any sense anymore, and they simplified it down. And that made everyone else happy. And so I'm hoping as we move forward and we tear more of this down, that more people will join us. And that the next time I do a presentation like this, they actually won't be able to fit it on a slide, and I'm going to have to make the text really small. Another thing that's come about in the past 6 months is we now have a platform architecture team. When we started this project, no one really owned a lot of the underlying code base. No, there was some people that worked on WTF, but there was no formal ownership. There was no formal ownership of our IPC system inside Blink. There was no formal ownership of OilPan and so on. There were people that worked on it, but there was no one it didn't belong to any team. And we fixed that too. So now there's a platform architecture team. The architecture team owns all of those shared components, and we're here to help you complete these projects. So when you come into Blink and you say, I need to do this project, you can send us an email. I have the mailing list repeated right there again, just in case you forgot, although there's an I that's sort of right on the black line, so you can't see it at all. But please email us, because our job is to make sure that when you integrate with Blink, you write the least amount of code possible. And if you post a patch that has a ton of plumbing in it, that makes me really sad. And I'm here to help make sure that doesn't happen anymore. So you might ask, what are we going to do next? Like, we finished, right? We deleted like 50,000 lines or something, and we're almost done. I mean, actually, there's a lot to do. So the first thing is services are coming. If you remember the original Onion Soup presentation, we talked about servicifying the code base. This is what a service is. A service is a component in Blink that takes information and then transforms it into something else to be consumed outside of Blink. Historically, the way that this worked is that what would happen is we would have this really low-level API, and you would come hook into some random callback, maybe like page loaded. You would use this low-level API to pull all the content out of the page and then implement your feature. Except in practice, what happened was there was a lot of security bugs, and we didn't give a very powerful API, and all the developers out there ended up hacking things in, and even worse, Content Shell doesn't run most of these features, which is actually pretty amazing. We profile in Content Shell mostly, and then you load Chrome and you say, what is this translate thing that's in my profile? So that's what we're going to fix. We're going to move translate and the page serializer and all these other components into Blink behind services. And this has really big benefits. This means that when you change layout code, we can have a low-level unit test and performance test for running, for example, the translation system or the page serialization system. And we're just going to move those behind these abstractions. So this is coming very soon. All of this code will be moving very soon. And in that, WebNode is going to be going very soon. If you use WebNode, you should be thinking about where you should move your code. And the answer is into Blink. It'll simplify your code. You'll find out that the tools we have in Blink are way better. You'll find that the performance improves substantially, and that you end up just writing less code. So here is what we're going towards. We're going towards a world where we have this public API. We have a set of services that consumes information from inside Blink. And we have this nice system layer. And the system layer contains platform and WTF, our garbage collector base, mojo, and so on. And this nice level of layering actually simplifies the code base substantially. And we're about halfway here, now that we've moved most of the things out of Content Renderer. If you're still in Content Renderer and you're a part of Blink, you should move soon. If you're not using Mojo IPC yet, you should switch immediately. It's really important. It'll simplify your code. It makes everything actually way better. Plus, it'll probably give you a chance to audit your IPCs and see what you're really doing. So what exactly does a service do? I've said this in person a bunch, but I realized I'd never made a diagram. So I made one. A data funnel is what a service is. The way that autofill works is that it waits for the page to load, and then on page load, it actually walks the entire document looking for things that look like forms, all out in content. In the process, it allocates all kinds of strings and does string matching and so on. Well, your data funnel is when you move that system into Blink, the first step is just move the code. And some people have said, does that mean I have to change my code? The answer is no. Just move your code, and then we'll simplify as we go. And what you'll find is as you simplify, your code gets smaller and smaller. And then once your code is small, you'll see something amazing happen, which is there's not very much of it. And then you'll come to us and you'll say, autofill just needs to know the forms and the inputs. Can't Blink just do that? And the answer is yes, we can just do that. And we will add a map of forms and inputs, and your code will magically evaporate. And the more I look at the system, the more this becomes apparent. Autofill is a part of the platform. Translate is also a part of the platform. And what Translate is doing is actually not very complicated. And so once Blink knows how to implement the data funnel correctly, we can do it in a small amount of code instead of a very large amount of code that just crawls the DOM. So here's an example using distiller, which is sort of like a reader mode. It does seem that I misspelled distiller. That's awesome. And the way the distiller works is it actually crawls the entire document and counts a lot of information. For example, here it wants to know the number of elements, the number of anchors, the number of forms, and so on. And so what we did is we moved the code into Blink, and now there's a high-level service that it exposes, which is just a structure of aggregated information. And if you look at the code today, it just crawls the document. But what's awesome about this is that in the future, someone could look at it and be like, on every page load, I see the distiller service kick in, and it burns 5 milliseconds. And instead, they can just go hide the implementation details of this directly in the HTML parser, and I suspect it would go to 0, because it's just counting. And this also has a really nice benefit that this code is now unit tested, and the code out in content to unit test actually brings up a gigantic portion of Blink to be able to run a unit test. To run a unit test in Blink is actually quite simple. You make a document, you put some HTML in it, and magic. The next thing that we've learned in this process is that platform needs to be broken up into some smaller pieces. And so the next step is to modularize platform. Platform, if you look at it, already, if you squint, looks a little bit like this. There's an inspector directory, there's a mojo directory, and a network directory, and so on. And we're going to break it apart. And it's going to look something like this. Now, I don't have good names for these things. I like to call them frameworks. But there's other people that don't like the name framework. So we're going to brainstorm a little bit and paint the shed a couple times and come up with a better name. But for now, we'll call them boxes. And every team gets to own a box. Historically, Blink has this enormous owners file. There's core owners. I think it has like 45 people in it. It's very large. Platform has very few owners because, unfortunately, it's just sort of got access to all kinds of random stuff. But instead, once we zoom out a little bit and we think of Platform as being these nice big components, we can make owners. So as an example, Canuco is an owner in network now. And once we fix the deps and network is a modular component, then the loading team can own the networking component. And similarly with graphics and animation and so on. And so we're going to bring long-term ownership from the teams that use each component in Platform to them. And this also has a big benefit that while the web itself may be a tangle of features, the DOM and everything just sort of knows about everything, and that's core, your system doesn't have to be. In fact, if you look at the CSS parser, most of what it's doing has nothing to do with the DOM. It takes CSS and it builds a CSS selector. So you could imagine a component in Platform that is CSS parsing. You can imagine these nice owned components that have nothing to do with the tangle of crazy that is the web, where like weird side effects happen, that you can have ownership, that you can reuse, that you can unit test, and it's really awesome. Because building Platform is really fast, running unit tests is really fast, and long-term ownership makes me happy. The next step, we're going to simplify web. If your patch adds code to web, please double check that you really need to do that. If at all possible, put your code in core or modules or in some service. Because web is this strange thing that just has access to everybody else, and unfortunately just ends up like really jumbled. It has very little long-term ownership, it has no clear boundaries, and it has no clear owners. And that's all bad. So instead, find a new home for your code as we simplify web down. It will make both you happier and the code base happier. What's web going to become? Web is going to be only simple wrapper classes. It's going to be only virtual interfaces that are necessary. We're going to move these into what we're calling the public layer. Your service is a virtual interface that is implemented inside Blink. This also has a nice benefit that if you have code out in some component, in the components directory of the code base, and you want to write unit tests for Blink, you can just supply a virtual interface that is mocked out for your test. You don't have to bring up a big copy of Blink to run the HTML parser to spit out some information. You just mock out the data funnel and have it return whatever you want. And now your content tests become much faster. They don't need to start up a render process. They are nice unit tests. And anything that is not a content browser test is a better test. So if at all possible, avoid putting code there. Another awesome project that people are working on is unifying all the geometry types in the code base. We actually have 3 different types of geometry types. There's some out in UI GFX, there's some in platform geometry, and there's some in Skia. Now, I'd really love it if Skia would come join us in the party and merge their code into the rest of the Chromium repo. I know that that is very ambitious. So first, what we're going to do is move the geometry types in Blink over to being all backed by the stuff in UI GFX. And we're going to bring any optimizations that we did in Blink over to UI GFX and vice versa, and simplify the code down. This is really awesome because it means that we get rid of a bunch of like weird data type conversions at the boundary. And it also makes the code easier to understand. So if you're looking at the math inside the compositor and the math inside Blink, it just all looks the same. And we have just a bunch of things that are just randomly named. So this is actually a really exciting project. The next thing is there's still some stuff in Content Renderer, and we're going to start moving that out. When we started this 6 months ago, we said we're not sure how we're going to do this. And in the past 6 months, we know exactly how we're going to do this. So if you have code in Content Renderer, and that code seems like it might be better in Blink, as an example, does it touch the DOM? Does it use the document? Are you trying to parse information out of the document? You should go figure out how you can move it into Blink. If your code is just IPC plumbing, you should absolutely figure out how you can move it into Blink. It'll make you happier. And we know exactly how to do this now. Send us an email at platformarchitecturedev, and we will help you finish that project. So how do you get involved? How do you come join us at this party of simplifying the code base so that the next time I do this presentation, your name gets to be on the slide, and I get to talk about your amazing project that deletes 9,000 lines. First, don't renew your lease on content. If you have code in content, don't double down on it. Please, I see this every once in a while. Someone has a little bit of code there, and they add 500 or 1,000 more lines. And you'd be better served by just moving yourself to Blink first, and just don't double down on it. Next, if you're building a new feature, don't rent any new space in content. Every once in a while, I see someone build a new feature, and they build their thing out there. And so I'm here to evangelize not to do that. And I think the reason people do that is because they don't know that the Blink project is actually here to hug you until your feature is awesome. Right? So if you're building autofill, we don't want to pretend that autofill doesn't exist. We know that autofill exists, and we actually care about your success. So please come to the Blink project. Please come to the platform architecture team. It's our job to make you successful. It's our job to make you enjoy working on this project. And so don't think that you need to live out in components so people can ignore you. That's exactly the opposite of what we want. We want you to come join us and have fun. Finally, please join the Mojo party. If you're adding new IPCs, please consider switching to Mojo as soon as possible. It simplifies things both in the code base and allows you to migrate to Blink. I hear that it's faster. It also is considerably simpler because all the data type conversions happen magically. Also, if you use WebNode, please stop using WebNode. It is not the API you are looking for. In fact, it is a really bizarre subset of the web platform that does basically nothing that you really want. And you're much better served by putting your code in Blink and then figuring out how to use the actual web platform. Also, think in terms of services. If your code is, for example, a new security feature that wants to know about all of the frames and all of the links on the page, instead of trying to write code out in content, come to us. We'll design the service for you. We'll create the data funnel inside Blink that takes all of that content and ships it to you. And this has actually some really nice benefits. It means that going forward, the Blink team and the DOM team sees your code all the time. And they will optimize it, and they will help maintain it, and they will fix security bugs in it. Because the code, instead of being far away, is very close. And the more important your code is, the more deeply integrated we can get. And so please join us at the party and think in terms of services. Next, if your team has a part of platform, please become an owner. For example, Jeremy in the back there works in platform graphics. He does awesome work out in platform graphics. And what we should do is fix the deps file in platform graphics to make it a modular component, and then make Jeremy and Chris and so on owners of platform graphics. And now that component has long-term ownership. It's clear who owns it. It's clear who gets code reviews. And we're in a much better place.
We are both the platform graphics owners. The file exists.
So the file already exists. Ha! They're so far ahead of me. So we're just going to repeat that process in every part of the code base until everybody has an owner. Next, please ask for help. If you have a problem, please don't add hacks. Come to us. If you're trying to use Mojo and it seemed like it should be easy, and instead you wrote like 100 lines of boilerplate, please come to us. If you're trying to parse the DOM and something doesn't seem to make sense, please come to us. And we will help design the system for you so that as you're building it, you have to write the least amount of code possible. Because if we do that, we're in a way better place. And it turns out a substantial amount of what gets done on the web is actually easy if you know which one of the like 1,000 APIs to call. Unfortunately, the best documentation we have is MDN, which is really good, except that you often have to read like all of it to figure out what you're supposed to do. So instead, if you come talk to us, we can have more of a design discussion, and we can help you find the right APIs, and then we can help you simplify your code. So until next time, soup chefs, thank you so much for coming to BlinkOn. Please reach out to us, and let's all work to make this product simpler, faster, and a more happy place to be. So I think I have time for questions.
The list that you were just talking about, us, who is it? Who is on the team?
The platform architecture team?
Yeah.
So the question is, who is on the architecture team? The architecture team, we're a ragtag band of bandits that like to work on garbage collection or something. That's a good question. So the team, there is, I think, architecture one-pager. It went to the mailing list. I probably should have had a link here. I'll fix my slide after this to have a link. There's a bunch of people in Tokyo. We have ownership over frames. If NASCO is in the room somewhere. NASCO's back there. So NASCO has joined us with the UPIF team so that we can mutually make sure that both UPIF ships and the frame tree in Blink stops like randomly exploding in people's faces, which is very exciting. We also have some people elsewhere. I think it's about 20 people total. I actually don't know how many people NASCO has. I think he has like 50 people all making UPIF awesome. In reality, there's just a couple of us. But we're actually really excited if someone wants to join us. That would be really great. And the projects that we're working on are all about making sure that all the developers who work in the code base are happier. Because that's really our charter. Like we spent a long time trying to wordsmith it, but really like our charter is about developer happiness. Like OilPan is about developer happiness. Like instead of your code randomly crashing and you spending like weeks and weeks trying to find that use after free, we're going to give you tools so that you don't have to do that. So you get the same lifetime management that JavaScript has. And we just want to repeat that process. So we're trying to fix like bindings and OilPan. Currently, I'm working on simplifying WTF. We're working with everyone who's migrating to Mojo. And just anytime someone comes to us and says, like, I wrote these 50 lines in 5 places, like, it's our job to make sure that you don't do that ever again. Yes?
I'm sure, this is on. I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of this, and I think you might have mentioned it in passing, but are there big performance wins to be had from having like just a single DROM traversal for all the services, autofill, and so on?
Yeah, so the question there is like, if we only traverse the DOM once, are there performance gains to be had? The answer is absolutely yes. One thing that we found as we've simplified the code base, I didn't have a slide on it because I don't have exact numbers. Dimitri and I were working on making the communication between Blink better. As an example, translate runs at some point to figure out if the page is translatable. On some devices, that takes a full second. And its timing is quite poor because it doesn't really understand the system. It's like far away. It's like up through like many, many layers. And then at some point, it's like, oh, I should probably figure out if the page is translatable. And then your phone janks for an entire second while it tries to figure that out, which is really bad. And so once we move that stuff into Blink, I suspect we can bring that 1 second down to like 50 milliseconds or something, and maybe 0 if just like the parser is accumulating text that looks translatable. And I think there's a bunch of places where we can do that. Other places are simplifying the interface between us and like the graphics layers. There's other improvements to be had between us and the media stack. There's like, the media stack call stacks are often ridiculous. They also used to be full of void pointers. I think we fixed some of that recently. But I'm hoping that as we fix that and people see a better picture of the whole system, we'll see big wins. So as an example, like we used to pass this like object out to the media stack. It was in a void pointer. They would give it back to us. We'd cast it and pray. And once you like zoom out and fix all the types and the media's team sees both sides, I suspect there's lots of code on either side that is repeating the same stuff over and over again.
Hey, it's Pavel speaking. Great progress. Originally, I had concerns, but the concerns were around the new layer of APIs and the web and core existing APIs. And the concern was that whether we will be efficient at removing them entirely in favor of the new one. And so the first question is, what's the progress of that? But the more interesting one, you were mentioning, you were kind of speaking to us and you were saying, if you do this and that, please convert to Mojo and bring your code into Blink. But those were all sort of suggestions to Chromium people, like content renderer people, not necessarily the Blink people. So what happens there? What happens to the content renderer? Do you envision it to be a part of Blink? Do we expect that everyone who has been contributing to core renderer, content renderer are going to be on BlinkOn in 6 months? Like, what's the boundary now? Is it going to go away?
That's a good question. So what is the API progress? If we back up here to the list of stuff that is already moved, there's a big list of stuff. So we've already moved all of these components out of Content Renderer. It's substantially smaller than it ever was. And in practice, a lot of the content renderer people are Blink people. And if they aren't, they probably should be. In fact, if you look at the notifications code, it's like Peter and a couple other people were working on notifications. And there was like someone working on the content side and someone working on the Blink side, and someone sort of straddling the boundary. And it's sort of unfortunate, actually, if your team is split in the middle, where you're like, have this like front-end, back-end split, but in your team of like 2 people. So instead, I think you're much better served if everyone on your team is comfortable coming to Blink and working with us, and working in the browser process and so on. And so long term, I hope yes. I hope that instead of BlinkOn just being BlinkOn, that it's like ChromiumCon, and that everybody who works on it feels like they're part of the same party and that we're working together. And so that API we're moving towards, we've already moved Distiller behind some things. Soon we're going to move, the autofill people are here in the front, they're going to move it too, which will be awesome actually. It should make autofill a lot faster and also much simpler. And I think that's really great. It's unfortunate that the autofill team previously was not really part of the Blink team. And they were just sort of like out there. And as we bring them in, I think everyone has a much better time. Sometimes when you talk to people about Blink, they say, like, that place is weird. And yeah, our code base might be a little weird, but I think most of the problem is that we just haven't really like hugged it out yet. And so we need to have all those people, like having Nasco and Avi, and there's like a bunch of content people here, like more than ever at BlinkOn. And as going forward, I hope we have even more people here. Avi was like, if I'm here, I'm going to call him out. Previously, he was like, he's making faces too. Avi, raise your hand so everyone can see you. Avi's a content owner. If you haven't met Avi, there you go. He's sitting next to Nasco, who's working on UPIF. Avi was like, if I come to BlinkOn, will I be useful? Like, is that good? The answer is absolutely yes. Like, having someone from content here is like super useful. We can't pretend that either side like doesn't exist. We can't pretend that the browser process is this like far off ether that we like never talk to. So I think we'll be much happier once we sort of work together and once we all sort of like think about the bigger platform and the bigger picture. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, and find me after.